Jack Sullivan had always been a man of resilience, but the fire that claimed the lives of his wife and children had left him shattered. For months, he had drifted from town to town, struggling to find his place in a world that seemed to have forgotten him. Then, a letter arrived, offering him the chance to buy an abandoned ranch in Deadwood Ridge, a town nestled in the hills of the American West. The ranch had once been thriving, but now it stood in ruins, its wooden fences broken and the land untended. Yet for Jack, it symbolized something more than just a piece of land. It was a chance to rebuild. The idea of rebuilding his life on this forgotten property consumed him. It was his way of starting over, a way to honor the memory of his family by creating something new in their absence. He couldn't bring them back, but he could honor them by breathing life into the land that had once thrived. Jack spent the first few days on the property, clearing the overgrown brush and repairing the broken fences. Every sunrise, he felt a sense of purpose return to his chest, as if the land itself was offering him a path forward. One day, while exploring the grounds, Jack stumbled upon an old barn at the far end of the property. The barn had been neglected for years, its wooden planks warped and faded by time and the elements. Curiosity pushed him forward, and he stepped inside. The smell of mildew and decay hit him, but Jack pressed on, moving through the thick layers of dust that covered everything. The barn, though falling apart, held remnants of the past, old farming tools, rusted chains, and broken wooden crates. As he ventured deeper into the barn, Jack's eyes were drawn to a small, rusted door at the far end. The door was nearly hidden behind a pile of old crates and junk. Something about it felt significant. Perhaps it was the way the light from the setting sun seemed to highlight the door's edges. Or perhaps it was just the need to discover something new. Jack's heart raced as he moved the debris out of the way and forced the door open. He could barely make out a narrow staircase descending into darkness below. With a sense of trepidation and curiosity, Jack descended into the basement. The air grew colder as he made his way down, and the faint sound of his footsteps echoed in the silence. The basement was cramped, with low ceilings and damp stone walls. As Jack's eyes adjusted to the darkness, he saw rows of old crates stacked against the walls, their surfaces covered in a thick layer of dust. The place was untouched for decades. He took a deep breath, his pulse quickening as he approached the closest crate. As Jack carefully opened the crate, the first thing he noticed was stacks of old papers, letters bound with faded leather straps. They were covered in dust, the edges yellowed with age. Intrigued, he picked up the first letter and carefully unfurled it. The handwriting was elegant, yet the ink had faded in places, making the words a little difficult to read. As Jack deciphered the contents, he realized that the letter was from the early 1800s. His heart skipped a beat. This wasn't just any correspondence. The letter held important details about events in the region that Jack had never heard of. The letters spoke of a time long before Deadwood Ridge had become the sleepy town it was now. They detailed dealings between influential men and families, trade routes, and hidden resources that had once made the region a thriving center of commerce. It was as if these letters held the secrets to a forgotten chapter of the West's history. Jack's mind raced as he read on, realizing that the information contained within these letters could change everything he knew about the area. He carefully stacked the letters back into the crate, a sense of purpose growing inside him. Jack knew he couldn't just walk away from this discovery. These letters weren't just old remnants of the past. They were pieces of a puzzle that could reveal a truth long buried. As he ascended from the basement, Jack felt a spark of hope and excitement he hadn't experienced in years. The discovery of these letters had opened a door, not just to the past, but to a new future, one that could redefine the history of Deadwood Ridge. As Jack sat down in the dim light of his cabin, the first letter from the stack felt strangely alive in his hands. The elegant handwriting was unmistakably that of Clarence Monroe, a name Jack had heard in whispers throughout his travels. Monroe had been a powerful magnate, the kind of man whose influence had shaped the very foundation of the American West. The letter spoke of trade, land deals, and ambitions that spanned across states. Yet, as Jack read deeper, he realized there was more to Monroe's story than the glamorous persona he had imagined. The letter detailed his involvement in questionable dealings, manipulating the land and resources of Deadwood Ridge for personal gain. The more Jack read, the darker the picture became. Monroe had used his wealth and power to bully local farmers, seize valuable resources, and consolidate vast tracts of land under his control. But there was something even more intriguing buried in the letter. Clarence Monroe mentioned a treasure, something hidden, buried beneath the very soil Jack now called home. The treasure wasn't gold or jewels, but a map, one that led to secrets long lost in the history of the West. Jack's pulse quickened as he read about the map's importance. It could shift the power dynamics of the entire region. Monroe's words hinted at buried truths that could reshape the economy and history of Deadwood Ridge. Jack could feel the weight of the revelation settle in his chest. He had come to this ranch to start over, but now it seemed his journey was intertwined with forces far beyond his control. The letter spoke of a dangerous alliance between Monroe and other influential men, whose names were kept hidden. Together, they had manipulated the land for their benefit, but the true nature of their work was never fully revealed. Jack realized that Monroe's legacy wasn't one of prosperity, but one steeped in manipulation and betrayal. As Jack absorbed the final words of the letter, a faint noise interrupted his thoughts. A creak of the floorboards upstairs. He quickly set the letter down and stood up, heart racing. Someone was in his cabin. Jack wasn't foolish. He had been cautious since arriving, but the isolation of the ranch had made him complacent. The noise grew louder, as if someone was moving around upstairs. Gripping the letter in his hand, Jack moved toward the stairs, every sense on high alert. The footsteps stopped abruptly when Jack reached the top of the stairs. The silence was thick and unnerving. Jack crept forward, and as he stepped into the room, he saw a shadowy figure standing by the window, watching the outside world. The figure turned slowly, as if sensing Jack's presence. The man's weathered face was familiar. Tommy Boyd, a bounty hunter who had worked the region for years, known for his ruthless pursuit of anyone with a price on their head. Jack's eyes narrowed. Tommy's reputation preceded him. "Didn't expect to see you out here, Boyd," Jack said, his voice steady despite the tension in the air. Tommy didn't flinch, merely offering a slow, knowing smile. "You're meddling with things you don't understand, Jack," he said, his gravelly voice carrying a warning. "This land, this ranch, it's not just a patch of dirt. It's tied to the history of men who didn't play fair, and if you're not careful, it'll swallow you whole." Jack's pulse quickened at Tommy's words. This wasn't just about the ranch anymore. It was about something much bigger. Tommy stepped closer, his boots creaking on the wooden floor. "Clarence Monroe," he continued, "was no saint. He was a man who used the land to control people. He buried his sins with a treasure, but that treasure has a price. The map you're looking for, it's dangerous. There are people who'll kill to get their hands on it." Jack stood frozen, the letter still clenched in his hand. This was no longer a simple search for a fresh start. Monroe's past was alive in the present, and it was clear that Jack had stepped into something much larger than he had ever imagined. Despite the risks, Jack couldn't turn back. His curiosity burned brighter than the fear that crept up his spine. He knew that Monroe's secrets could change everything, not just for him, but for the entire town of Deadwood Ridge. The past had a way of reaching out, pulling people into its grip, and Jack was about to find out just how deep the web of deceit and treasure really went. "I'm not backing down," Jack said firmly, meeting Tommy's gaze. "Whatever Monroe left behind, I'm going to find it." With those words, Jack knew he was about to uncover a truth that could alter the history of the West forever. Jack had barely settled into Deadwood Ridge when the questions began. The townsfolk, both curious and wary of the newcomer, had their own stories to tell about Clarence Monroe. He wasn't just a former land magnate. Monroe had been the shadow behind the town's growth, quietly pulling the strings. Jack visited old homesteaders, now long retired, and the few remaining town historians. Some spoke with disdain, others with reverence, but all agreed on one thing: Monroe's influence had been undeniable. His disappearance, however, was shrouded in mystery. No one knew exactly why he left, only that he vanished one day, leaving a void that no one had dared to fill. The more Jack asked, the more unsettling the answers became. Monroe wasn't just a wealthy man, he was a puppeteer, controlling local politics, trade, and even the town's economy. Yet, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that something was being hidden, some detail that had been buried with Monroe. He approached Marshal Rick Dalton, the town's no-nonsense lawman who had been known to keep his ear to the ground when it came to town gossip. But instead of welcoming Jack's curiosity, Dalton eyed him with suspicion. "You don't want to be digging around in Monroe's past," the marshal warned, his voice low and grim. "There are people still out there with enough power to erase anyone who gets too close to the truth." Despite the warnings, Jack felt an unshakable pull to uncover the full extent of Monroe's legacy. A few days later, he walked into Saloon's Rest, the only saloon in town, hoping to find more clues. The saloon was dimly lit, filled with the chatter of cowboys and traders swapping tales and drinks. At the far end of the bar sat a woman who caught Jack's attention, a historian and local journalist named Emma Carter. She was scribbling in a notebook, her brow furrowed in concentration. Jack knew right away that she wasn't like the other townsfolk. She didn't seem afraid of the past. In fact, it looked like she was actively trying to uncover it. Jack approached her and introduced himself. Emma looked up, her piercing green eyes assessing him before she spoke. "You're the one asking about Clarence Monroe, aren't you?" she asked, a slight smile forming on her lips. Jack nodded, taken aback by how quickly she knew. "My grandmother worked with him," Emma continued, her voice dropping slightly. "She was one of his secretaries before he disappeared. I've been digging into his past for years, but every time I get close to the truth, something happens to stop me. People in this town want Monroe's secrets to stay buried." Jack could feel the weight of her words. Emma had more knowledge than anyone he'd spoken to so far. The conversation took a turn as Emma revealed that Monroe had kept a series of documents hidden, documents that had been passed down through her family. Her grandmother had kept some of them locked away, but Emma had managed to find several letters that detailed Monroe's final years in Deadwood Ridge. The letters spoke of deals and betrayals, as well as a map Monroe had drawn himself, indicating where a treasure was buried on the ranch. Emma didn't know where the map was, but she believed it was somewhere in the town, hidden away by Monroe himself. Jack and Emma decided to combine their efforts, certain that the answers they sought were now within reach. As they began to work together, Jack noticed that Emma's drive was just as strong as his own. The two of them combed through the letters, piecing together Monroe's cryptic notes. The treasure wasn't just money or jewels, they soon realized. It was a set of documents that could reveal the true history of Deadwood Ridge, a history that Monroe had kept concealed for years. The pieces were scattered, hidden in places Monroe trusted only a select few to know. The map in the letters wasn't straightforward. It was a series of riddles and symbols pointing to various locations on Jack's ranch, where Monroe had conducted much of his business. Every clue they deciphered led them to a different part of the ranch. But with each discovery, Jack grew more and more aware of the dangers surrounding them. Monroe's past wasn't just a web of business dealings. It was a tangled mess of lies, threats, and shady alliances. There were still people in the town who didn't want these secrets coming to light, and Jack couldn't help but wonder if some of those people were watching him now. As he and Emma ventured further into the ranch, the significance of their discoveries became clearer. They weren't just uncovering the past, they were on the verge of exposing the foundations of the town's wealth and power, all tied back to Monroe's manipulations. The stakes had risen dramatically. Jack's search for the treasure had become far more than an exploration of Monroe's secrets. It had become a race against time. Every step they took led them deeper into a mystery that could change everything about Deadwood Ridge. The clues seemed to be leading them to the heart of Monroe's empire, and Jack wasn't sure how much further he could go before someone or something stopped him. As Emma and Jack worked tirelessly, their bond grew stronger, and they realized they were in this together. What they were uncovering wasn't just about treasure, it was about control, power, and the hidden history of the land that had shaped their lives. Jack's resolve was now solidified. He would finish what Monroe had started, no matter the cost. With Emma by his side, he began to piece together the final elements of the map, knowing that whatever they found next would be the key to understanding why Monroe had gone to such lengths to conceal the truth. As they stood in the middle of the ranch staring at the ground that had witnessed decades of hidden history, Jack understood one thing. This journey wasn't just about finding treasure, it was about reclaiming the land's true legacy, one that had been stolen and buried long ago. As Jack and Emma delved deeper into the mystery of Clarence Monroe and the treasure, the atmosphere in Deadwood Ridge grew increasingly tense. The more they uncovered, the more they realized that they were not the only ones searching for the elusive treasure. Powerful forces began to take notice of their investigation, and not all of them had good intentions. Tommy Boyd, the bounty hunter who had warned Jack about Monroe's past, appeared again, his presence more ominous this time. Jack could sense that Boyd was not just a lone figure. He was connected to something much larger, a network of criminals who would stop at nothing to get their hands on the treasure. It wasn't long before Jack began hearing rumors about Boyd's ties to a notorious gang of outlaws that had been wreaking havoc in the surrounding areas for years. This gang had been involved in various illegal activities, from smuggling to land theft, and it seemed that they were now focused on Deadwood Ridge. Tommy Boyd, once a simple bounty hunter, was revealed to be working as a middleman for the outlaws, gathering information and using violence to intimidate anyone who got too close to the treasure. Jack's instincts told him that the game he had entered was more dangerous than he had anticipated. The realization that Monroe's legacy had attracted such dark forces weighed heavily on Jack. As he and Emma continued to piece together the clues, they found themselves shadowed by figures who were watching their every move. They had become pawns in a much larger game, one in which the stakes were life and death. Jack's every step was being monitored, and he began to understand that his quest for truth was not just a personal journey. It was now a fight for control of Deadwood Ridge. Tommy and his associates would stop at nothing to ensure the map and its secrets were theirs, and Jack knew they were willing to use any means necessary to claim it. One fateful night, as Jack made his way home from the saloon, he was ambushed. Two of Tommy's hired goons attacked him from the shadows, knocking him to the ground before he could draw his gun. They were quick and efficient, and Jack barely had time to react. The fight was brutal, and Jack knew that if he didn't manage to turn the tables, he wouldn't survive. Blood dripped from his temple, his vision blurry as the men pressed down on him. He could feel his strength slipping away. Just as the goons prepared to deal the final blow, a shot rang out, and one of the attackers fell. Marshal Rick Dalton, the lawman who had been watching Jack from a distance, appeared just in time to save him. With swift precision, Dalton disarmed the remaining attacker and handcuffed him. Jack, barely able to stand, leaned against the marshal for support. Dalton's gaze was hard, and his voice grim. "You're playing with fire, Jack," he warned. "These men will stop at nothing. You've stirred up something you don't understand, and now the town is at risk. If you continue down this path, you won't just lose your life. You'll bring down the entire town with you." The marshal's words hit Jack like a cold wave, but he refused to back down. Deadwood Ridge was his home, and he had come too far to abandon the search for the truth. However, he couldn't ignore the growing danger around him. The threats were no longer just about the treasure, they were about the very fabric of the town. As Jack recovered from the attack, he knew that every move he made from this point forward would be under scrutiny. It wasn't just about Monroe's past, It was about stopping the dark forces from destroying everything he held dear. Later that night, Emma visited Jack at his cabin. She had uncovered something that could change everything. While she had been investigating the documents left by Monroe, she found a hidden ledger that detailed illegal land deals involving the government and Monroe's associates. The connections between Monroe and powerful political figures were more than just business. They were part of a massive conspiracy to manipulate land rights and control the growth of the region. Emma's discovery made it clear. The treasure was not just a hidden fortune, it was a key to exposing a corrupt system that had been thriving in the shadows for years. With renewed determination, Jack and Emma decided they would push forward. The danger was greater than ever, but they knew they couldn't back down. They weren't just looking for a treasure, they were fighting to protect Deadwood Ridge from the very people who had been manipulating it for decades. They would need to decipher the final clues, uncover the last of Monroe's secrets, and confront the power players who would stop at nothing to keep those secrets buried. Jack and Emma knew that their future, and the future of Deadwood Ridge, depended on the success of their mission. They could no longer afford to hesitate. Jack and Emma had come a long way since they first uncovered the first letter, but now, with the final clue in their hands, they were closer than ever to revealing the truth behind Clarence Monroe's empire. The map they had been deciphering for weeks pointed to a hidden cave deep in the hills surrounding Deadwood Ridge. As they hiked up the steep terrain, Jack couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation and dread. The weight of Monroe's legacy, the treasure they were about to uncover, and the dangers lurking nearby all pressed on him. He had come to realize that the treasure was never meant to be material wealth. It was something far more powerful, something that could change the entire town. Reaching the cave's entrance, the two stood for a moment in silence. The hidden passage, dark and foreboding, stretched before them like a secret waiting to be unearthed. With lanterns in hand, Jack and Emma cautiously stepped inside, their footsteps echoing off the stone walls. The air grew cooler as they ventured deeper into the cave, and soon they reached the heart of the hidden chamber. There, beneath layers of rock and dirt, was a small wooden chest, untouched by time. As Jack opened it, the contents were not what he expected. Instead of gold or silver, the chest contained a series of meticulously preserved documents, along with a final letter from Monroe himself. The documents in the chest detailed the true history of Deadwood Ridge, the town's foundation, the manipulation of land and resources, and the corrupt deals that made Monroe a kingmaker. Monroe had been the mastermind behind the growth of Deadwood Ridge, using underhanded tactics to control the land, strip its natural resources, and build his empire on the backs of the local settlers. The documents revealed that Monroe had even bribed government officials, ensuring that his hold over the region would be unchallenged. The treasure they had been searching for was not wealth in the traditional sense. It was the key to unlocking the truth and exposing the corruption that had been hidden for decades. As they examined the papers, a cold shiver ran down Jack's spine. Monroe's final letter made it clear that the wealth he had amassed came at a terrible cost. The foundations of the town had been built on lies, and the true owners of the land were never recognized. Deadwood Ridge had been shaped by Monroe's greed, and the people who had worked the land had been nothing more than pawns in his game. Jack's resolve hardened. These documents weren't just pieces of paper, they were weapons that could change the future of the town. But as they read through the final pages, the sound of footsteps outside the cave interrupted their thoughts. Tommy Boyd and his gang of outlaws had found them. The realization hit Jack like a punch to the gut. It seemed inevitable. Tommy had been following them all along, and now, at the final moment, he had arrived to claim what he thought was his. The outlaw leader, his face twisted with greed, stepped into the cave, flanked by two of his men. "I knew you'd find it," Tommy sneered. "But you didn't think I'd let you walk away with it, did you?" Jack's mind raced. The weight of the documents in his hands was now a target on their backs, and the only thing standing between them and Tommy's men was their wits, and a few old farming tools Jack had found in the cave. The confrontation was brutal. Tommy and his men were armed, while Jack and Emma had only their bare hands and the determination to survive. As the fight escalated, Jack realized that his life as a farmer had taught him more than just how to till soil. It had taught him how to think quickly, how to improvise, and how to use his environment to his advantage. In a desperate move, Jack grabbed an old iron rod from the cave's walls and swung it at one of Tommy's men, knocking him off balance. Emma, quick to act, grabbed a sharp rock and used it to defend herself. They fought with everything they had, but it became clear that their only chance was escape. Jack and Emma, bloodied and bruised, made a break for the exit. As they scrambled through the narrow passage, Tommy's voice echoed behind them, promising that they wouldn't leave alive. But Jack and Emma were determined. They had come too far to let the past and their lives be buried with Monroe's secrets. Just as they reached the entrance of the cave, they were met by Marshal Rick Dalton, who'd been tracking Tommy's movements for days. With gunfire ringing in the air, Dalton acted swiftly, disarming Tommy and his men before they could pursue Jack and Emma any further. The lawman had finally decided to take action against the criminals who had controlled Deadwood Ridge for far too long. In the aftermath of the confrontation, Jack and Emma breathed a collective sigh of relief. The documents they had fought so hard to obtain were now safe, and Tommy Boyd and his gang were in the custody of the law. Marshal Dalton, though a man of few words, nodded in approval. "You two stirred up more trouble than I ever imagined, but you got the job done," he said gruffly. Jack couldn't help but smile, knowing that the real work had only just begun. The truth had been uncovered, but now it was time to share it with the town. Deadwood Ridge would never be the same again, and neither would they. With the documents in their possession and the outlaws captured, Jack and Emma knew they had accomplished what they set out to do. The treasure was never about wealth. It was about truth, power, and the future of Deadwood Ridge. As they walked back into town, their steps were lighter, knowing that they had helped set things right. Monroe's dark legacy had been exposed, and the town could finally begin to heal. Jack had found more than a new beginning. He had found justice, and in doing so, he had reclaimed the future of Deadwood Ridge. Jack and Emma's return to Deadwood Ridge was met with a mixture of skepticism and hope. The town had long been overshadowed by the power that Clarence Monroe had wielded over it, and the discovery of his dark secrets sent shockwaves through the community. As the two of them presented the documents revealing the truth about Monroe's corrupt dealings, the citizens of Deadwood Ridge began to understand the depth of the manipulation that had kept them in servitude for so long. The town had been built on lies, but now, with the truth exposed, it had the opportunity to rebuild. Jack and Emma knew that this was just the beginning, but the revelations were enough to change the course of history. The citizens gathered in the town hall, their faces a mixture of anger, disbelief, and relief. Some had known that something wasn't right, but they hadn't known how deep the corruption ran. Others were in shock, unable to grasp the idea that the foundation of their town, their livelihood, had been manipulated for decades by one man's greed. As Jack read aloud the letters and documents detailing Monroe's exploitation of the land and its resources, a sense of clarity began to replace the confusion. It was a painful truth, but it was necessary. The town had to face its past in order to move forward. As the truth settled in, the townspeople began to talk amongst themselves. Some were ready to take action, eager to dismantle the legacy of Monroe and seize back control of the land they had worked for so long. Others were hesitant, unsure of how to proceed in a world where their very existence had been shaped by corruption. But Jack and Emma stood firm, determined to help the community heal. They had uncovered the truth, and now it was time to help the people of Deadwood Ridge reclaim what had been stolen from them. Jack's ranch, which had once been a symbol of personal loss and rebirth, became a symbol of the town's collective hope. It was here, on this very land, that Jack and Emma began a new project. A community effort to rebuild Deadwood Ridge, starting with the land itself. The ranch would be transformed into a cooperative, where everyone had a stake in the future. They would work the land together fairly and ethically, without the oppressive control of a single man. The town would begin to heal, slowly but surely, as the people of Deadwood Ridge learned to rely on one another rather than the corrupt systems that had held them down for so long. Emma took the lead in organizing educational programs for the townspeople, teaching them about sustainable farming, land rights, and the importance of cooperation. Jack focused on ensuring that the resources of the land were used wisely, that the town's wealth would be shared by all. It wasn't easy. Many had been living under Monroe's control for so long that change didn't come without resistance, but the project was gaining traction. As the town began to change, so too did the people. They learned to trust each other again, and slowly, Deadwood Ridge began to thrive once more. For Jack, the changes in the town were deeply personal. He had come to Deadwood Ridge seeking a new beginning, a place where he could rebuild his life after the tragedy he had suffered. But what he had found was so much more than that. He had found a community willing to rise from the ashes of its past, to reclaim its future from the shadows of greed and corruption. Jack realized that in helping the town rebuild, he had also rebuilt himself. He had not only found a new purpose, but a family in the people of Deadwood Ridge. In a quiet moment, standing alone at the edge of his property, Jack decided it was time to take one final step. The letters and documents that had changed everything were a powerful reminder of the past, but they also symbolized the darkness that had once consumed the town. Jack knew that in order for Deadwood Ridge to truly move forward, the past had to be put to rest. With Emma by his side, Jack buried the letters in a small, unmarked grave near the ranch, marking the end of one era and the beginning of another. The past was no longer a shadow over the town. It was buried, and with it the ghosts of Monroe's empire. As Jack filled in the last bit of dirt, he felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The future of Deadwood Ridge was in the hands of its people now, free from the manipulation that had once held them captive. The land was theirs once more, and Jack knew that the new chapter for the town would be one of fairness, cooperation, and growth. He had done what he set out to do, uncovered the truth, dismantled the old power structures, and helped create something new. The legacy of the West, once defined by exploitation and greed, had now been rewritten by the hands of those who would build it from the ground up, stronger and more just than ever before.